Nomos is one of those brands you have to love, and the Zurich is a model that I think is the best they have to offer. There's a lot of things about the Nomos Zurich that I really like. The main thing being the fact that I find it so impressive that they were able to make a Worldtimer in such a way that it still carries a minimalistic attitude through the entire thing. If we focus on it, I'll throw the specs up on the screen. The watch itself is incredibly wearable. Most Worldtimers that I've taken a look at are thick or they're really wide. Like 42 millimeters seems to be a big favorite of watch companies. This one has a really nice proportion to the case. And for someone like myself that really likes thin watches and things I tend to forget about, this fits that to a T. And so when I had this come in for review, by the way, first watch company to ever send me something in for review. So I'm already a big fan of Nomos in my heart because they were so kind to send in 3 watches actually for me to take a look at, even though I'm still relatively small. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Nomos. So the Zurich model itself is one that I've had my eye on, and I specifically asked to see it because it's one that I think is something I'd actually consider purchasing. I'm someone that is really resistant to buy anything that's not the norm. And I'm starting to break out of that, and I'll talk over that in a watch collection video some other time, but I'm starting to look at other options, and the Nomos Zurich is one of those that I've kind of considered. There are some things I like and some things I don't like. To talk about the design generally, what you're going to notice right off the bat is that it's very minimalistic. They have a design concept that's supposed to be a Bauhaus style. Their background, if you don't know about Nomos, very briefly, essentially they're a relatively new company, and they started manufacturing their own movements in Germany. They first used ETA-based movements, as most watch companies would because they were new, and then they started manufacturing their own alpha caliber movements, so their own in-house manual wind movement. Now, I'm not someone that proposes that in-house is the end-all be-all. I love Sellita movements, I love ETA movements, but the fact that they put that investment in was something that I found was really interesting, and I felt like it was an investment in the future of the company. And I think that's kind of how I saw it when it comes to Nomos. Not just that, but they've taken it a step further by adding complications. So the Nomos Zurich is another in-house caliber, but this is a Worldtimer. To generally talk about how the Worldtimer functions, essentially you get to run it like a normal watch. So you set the time, you're good to go, but the top arrow is going to tell you the local time. So if I click the top button and it moves the date wheel, it moves the hour hand in 1 hour increments to match the wheel at the top. But then on the right hand side, you have the home time. So there's a button on the left side of the case that's recessed and you can't even see it, that you press to jump the hour hand 1 hour without moving the disc, therefore allowing you to change the home time. And it's really ingenious how Worldtimers work, and this is the first time I've really had a Worldtimer in my hands for a long period of time, and it started to make me think that my GMT here, this Explorer 2, is really outdated. Worldtimers are much better at doing the whole traveling thing and being elegant. Now, I'm a sports watch guy, so I'm not going to switch to a Worldtimer, I don't think, in the short term, but the point being that it made sense. The functionality of the watch makes sense. The design of the watch was really neat. The main thing I liked was the fact that there were essentially levels to the dial. So you would notice that everything was recessed in order to show each wheel and each component of the watch. And I love when there's depth inside a dial. That's what I loved about the Pelagos. That's what I liked about the Speedmaster, the new one. That's why I bought it instead of the original, because the step dial. I just like depth. Different elevations inside the watch is something that I'm really a fan of, I suppose. So in the positives, that's what I love the most. Those layers to the dial and the overall elegance and the way they put it together. The fact that they have a red accent on that hour hand and on the home icon is just so simplistic and yet so understandable. It made sense why they did it that way. And I really liked how it just kind of fit. There wasn't something in terms of overall layout that I thought, nah, I would change that. Or, this isn't quite the way I would do it. Even in terms of proportions, that's the other thing I love. It fit exactly how I would want it to fit. And it had a sapphire case back, so I got to see the movement. So in general, the package for what you would want is kind of perfect. And I'm always someone that nitpicks and gripes, and I'll go through a little bit of that in the second half. But in terms of positives, it basically took what I wanted out of a Nomos Worldtimer and nailed it to a T. And so I was really impressed and really satisfied with my experience looking at the watch. In terms of negatives, the one negative that always pops up with Nomos and me is their lugs. And it's not necessarily how they're designed. I understand that, dress watches sometimes have longer lugs and it makes sense, but it just doesn't fit right in my mind. Maybe I'm not used to dress watches. Maybe there's something about me that is wrong in thinking this, but their lugs are always a little longer than I would want. I wish they would just shorten them up and beef them up just a little bit without going too far to make it look like a sports watch, but that way you get rid of that gap between the case and the band. That always irks me about their watches is there's always a big separation, which makes it wear a little bit larger and kind of takes away some of the elegance in my mind. So that's something that I wish I could fix. The dial, the case, the movement, all that was great. The lugs I would change. I wish that they would just bring that band in a little bit closer to the case itself. The other thing that's difficult on Nomos watches is always resalability. Now, some people are shy about talking about resalability on different channels. I'm not. That's a key factor. When I'm looking to buy something, I want to know because I'm impulsive and I change my mind about watches typically within a year time frame. If I hold on to something longer than a year, it's something that I will never get rid of. Typically things come in, they come right back out. And so adding something to my collection that I know I have a downside of losing money, at least at retail, is something that makes me think, maybe that's not the right fit for me. And Nomos, unfortunately, is one of those many brands that is beautiful and well designed, but doesn't carry that same easy resalability. Now, the one caveat to that being that if you buy it well, like most watches, if you buy them well, you can typically make sure that you make most of your money back, 90% of it. So that's why I tend to buy pre-owned. So this watch pre-owned, depending on where you buy it from and the price you buy it for, is a really great value. I mean, you're getting a Worldtimer for way less than a lot of different GMT watches. A good example of that is if I took the Black Bay Pro and threw it up next to the Nomos Zurich, I would pick the Zurich every time, and I'm not even a dress watch guy. The last negative for me is just going to be its competition. Worldtimers are offered by a lot of brands, and so I think it's difficult for me to say the Nomos is a brand that's worth that premium because it comes from them versus a Worldtimer from Ball and Watch Company, for example. Like they have another Worldtimer, or Hamilton has a Worldtimer, and they're at very different price levels. Including Christopher Ward, they have a Worldtimer at a very different price level that I also find very attractive. And so it's difficult for me to say it's worth that premium just for an in-house movement. That is not really something that draws me that much, and even the minimalistic design is not something that draws me that far to pay that price range. Do me a favor and subscribe, always helpful. The more people I have on board, the more I can get watches in. So far I've been buying most of these watches to be able to review them, and it's kind of painful for the pocketbook. So please subscribe. Thank you very much. If you're looking at the Zurich, you think it's worth the money, you think it's gonna fit your wrist because you've tried it on, and I don't blame you, it fits well, and you think, I gotta have a Worldtimer, it has to be Nomos, I'm just unsure if I should pull the trigger, and you're ready to spend the money and you don't care about resaleability, then boom, buy it. This thing rocks. Of all the Nomos watches I've seen, it's by far my favorite from the company. And I have another review coming up of their newest models that they've released, and spoiler alert, I don't like them nearly as much as I like the Zurich. This watch rocks. What do you guys think? Do you like the Nomos Zurich? Do you think it could have been changed a little bit, especially with the band? Am I wrong on anything? I'm sure you guys will let me know. So till the next one, take care.